Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Whitehouse, Senator Schumer, and all of those who have been working so hard on this enormously important issue, which has everything to do with whether or not our country remains the kind of democracy that most of us want it to be. Mr. President, I come to the Senate floor today to express my profound disgust with the current state of our campaign finance system and to call for my fellow senators as a short-term effort to pass the Disclose Act. Passing the Disclose Act would be an important step forward, but clearly we have much more to do on this issue. Long-term, of course, we need a constitutional amendment to overturn this disastrous Supreme Court decision, the Citizens United 5-4 decision of 2 years ago. Long-term, in my view, we also need to move this country toward public funding of elections so that once and for all, big money will not dominate our political process. Long-term, there is no question in my mind that Citizens United will go down in history as one of the worst decisions ever rendered by a United States Supreme Court. 5 members of the court came to the bizarre conclusion that corporations should be treated as if they were people, that they have a First Amendment right to spend as much money as they want, to buy candidates, to buy elections, and somehow, in the midst of all of this unbelievable amount of spending, millions and millions of dollars, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that this would not even give the appearance of corruption. I think that is, frankly, an absurd conclusion. Mr. President, let me tell you, and my take on this may be a little bit different than some of my colleagues, what concerns me most about the Citizens United decisions. And that is, if we look at Citizens United in tandem with other trends in our economy today, what we see is that this nation is rapidly moving from an economic and political sense to an oligarchic form of society. Economically, what we see are fewer and fewer people who control our economy. We see a nation which has the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth, in which the top 1% of our nation owns 40% of the wealth, the bottom 60% own 2% of the wealth. And that gap between the very, very wealthy and everybody else is growing wider and wider. That's wealth. And in terms of income distribution, the situation is even worse. The last study that we have seen suggests that 93% of all new income between 2009 and 2010 went to the top 1%. So economically, we are moving toward a nation in which a few people have a significant amount of the wealth of America, significant amount of the income of America. In terms of concentration of ownership, we see a situation in which 6 financial institutions on Wall Street have assets equivalent to 2/3 of the GDP of the United States of America, over $9 trillion, controlled by 6 financial institutions whose recklessness, whose greed, whose illegal behavior drove us into the recession that we're struggling with right now. So as a nation now, the trends are fewer and fewer people own the wealth of America, fewer and fewer large corporations control the economy of America. But apparently, that is not good enough for the 1%, for our millionaire and billionaire friends. Now what they want to do is take that wealth and exercise it even more than has been the case in the past in the political realm, which now takes us to Citizens United. Now, in the real world, we all know what's going on with Citizens United. We know that billionaires are saying, look, yeah, it's great that I own an oil company, great that I own a coal company, great that I own gambling casinos, but gee, I could have even more fun by owning the United States government. So you have entities out there who are worth some $50 billion. The Koch brothers come to mind. And if you're worth $50 billion and you have all kinds of interactions with the federal government, you have strong political views, why wouldn't they spend $400 million, which is what the media says that family is going to spend, and maybe even more if you can purchase the United States government? That's not a bad investment. That's what Citizens United is about. It is billionaires spending huge amounts of money without disclosure. Without disclosure. Now, I would have gone further than this bill, but this bill is certainly an important step forward. What does it require? It says if you're going to spend more than $10,000 on a campaign, that you have to make public who you are. I don't think that is a terribly onerous provision. Now, the American people are not stupid. They understand that if somebody is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on political activities, they want something. That's what it is about. Why do people make campaign contributions? Now, many of us get a whole lot of campaign contributions from folks who give us $25, $30, $40. Most of my campaign contributions come from people who make less, give us less than $200. But if somebody is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a campaign, I think the American people have a right to know who that is and what they want, who is taking that money, and what those contributors are going to get in return. If you're a billionaire and you want lower taxes, have the courage to say, hey, I'm a billionaire, I'm putting money into a party, and what I'm going to get out of it is lower taxes for the rich. And if I'm somebody in a corporation that is polluting the air and the land and the water, and I want to get rid of those regulations, have the guts to come forward and say, yeah, that's what I want. I want to eviscerate the EPA. I don't care that children in Vermont or Rhode Island get sick. That's what I want. So what this is about is fairly elementary. What this is about is simply having those people, those institutions, corporations that are putting in unions, putting more than $10,000 into the political process, say who they are. Now, what concerns me very much about this whole process, and I think concerns the American people, is while our middle class disappears and poverty increases, while the gap between the very, very is growing wider, it appears very clear right now that these folks are not simply content. The top 1% are not simply content with owning the economy, with controlling the economy. They now want to control, to an even greater degree than is currently the case, the political process as well. And that's what these campaign contributions of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are about. When I think back on the history of this country and the enormous sacrifices that men and women made defending the American ideal, the ideal that was a vision to the entire world looked to the United States for what a strong democracy was about. One person, one vote. In my state of Vermont, we have March meetings. People come out. One person, one vote to discuss the municipal town budget, to discuss the school budget. And now we have evolved to a situation where one family can spend $400 million buying politicians, buying elections. That is a long, long way away from what democracy is supposed to mean in this country. So, Mr. President, the Disclose Act is a very important first step forward, and I hope that we can get strong support for that important piece of legislation. And with that, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.